welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast, episode number 35. My name is Phil, and joining me is Rohan. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. And today we have two very special guests. First one is Robbie. Good morning.
Morning.
And Stephen as well, who is also another iOS developer. Hey, Stephen.
Morning.
We have a big release coming out for the iOS app, which both of you have made the time to come and talk to us, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Same.
So before we get onto that, we'll start with the latest Home Assistant release, which is 0.79, and some big features coming out this week, which the first one is the new device registry. This allows integrations to tell Home Assistant not only about entities, but also which devices that the entities represent. So this was something that Paul has mentioned to us, at least maybe offline or in the last episode, for his big new features that are coming to Home Assistant. So this is the first way that Home Assistant is becoming a bit more user-friendly and more device-centric. So it'll be moving stuff away from the YAML files and more focused on the UI. So that's really cool.
I'm excited about this one.
Yes.
Yeah, finally, right?
Yeah.
Seriously, I know. Also on that note, the integration quality scale. So to make how integrations integrate better, essentially, or how good or poorly an integration integrates with Home Assistant and your entire environment, basically they're going to be opening up a scale to say different levels of, hey, is it good or is it amazing? And here's a list of essentially ways to improve that integration, right? So
now you'll be able to go, for example, against a Philips Hue integration and go, okay, this is rated 5 stars out of 5 as a good quality integration with Home Assistant.
Exactly. Whereas, let's say you're using a custom component that, isn't maybe it's not fully done, or maybe it is a published component, but it's could use a little bit of
TLC.
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe it's, hey, you know what? I have this light component, but it doesn't handle dimmers, even though dimmers exist for that platform, right? So there's a caveat there, and, maybe that will lower the quality of the integration as well there.
Yeah, and so as a component and platform developer, I built the HTML5 notifications, for example, Fitbit, Uber, GTFS, a couple of other ones. I'm really looking forward to this because it's been hard for me personally as a user without digging into code to determine what's actually like a relevant or useful integration versus one that is just, somebody built one time and hasn't maintained.
Yeah.
And this would especially be useful for the more complex integrations. I know over the years we've had issues with the Lutron integration as Lutron has made changes. And that integration has now been rewritten, I think, 4 or 5 times from scratch. And so I hope that the integration quality scale will kind of get people in the mindset of understanding that, this integration is, quote, provided with warranty or without, just meaning what the quality level is. And Paulus actually has discussed adding a support requirement possibly in the future to the quality scale, which could also be an interesting thing. So my understanding is that if you stop supporting it, then it could lose its badge and possibly even be removed from Home Assistant.
So would that be the developer stopping support, or would that be like the service stopping support? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the service stopping support we already remove, if it makes sense. But developer stopping. So, I mean, that's way, way far down the road. But still an interesting thought that, this can put us down that path.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
MultiFactor Authentication support is now available in 0.79. If you're using your username and password to log into your Home Assistant instance, you can now have Home Assistant send you a unique one-time code in order to log in, similar to how your bank would send you an SMS or use the Google Authenticator app on your phone. This now works with any notification platform available in Home Assistant, so you can use Google Hangouts, Pushbullet, even the iOS app. They're all available. You can just have that send you a unique code to log in. So that's a great security feature as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, the Logitech Circle component has been added. You have the camera and sensor platform. It goes by Logi, so I guess that's Logitech's cool new trendy way of calling themselves. Awesome. Yeah, so essentially it's you now have support for that platform if you've got it.
Logi is what they call their their IoT brand, is my understanding.
Yeah,
There's still
yeah.
Logitech for keyboards and iPhone devices and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go to logi.com, I think it does take you to logitech.com. And because it is, like you said, it's a subset of their stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't know why brands do that. You have a good name with your first name, just stick with it. But, oh well.
yeah, exactly.
We got an email from Adam. He emailed us feedback at haspodcast.io to say, the Spotlight episode on developing for Home Assistant inspired me to have a go at creating an integration. So as a starting point, I have created a new sensor platform to integrate Home Assistant with a UK bank called Starling. And the initial functionality allows your account balance to be exposed as a sensor in Home Assistant. So well done, Adam. Thank you very much for your contribution. We're glad the Spotlight episode helped you out.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys got him to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm terrified.
You don't want to do it?
I don't know when I'd want my bank account just like popping up in my house somewhere.
Exactly, right.
But if he's got a reason, I'm happy for him.
I definitely hope that gets a platinum on the quality scale.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd need it to be very secure, right?
Yeah. But, Adam, I'm happy to hear that you decided to start developing after hearing the podcast. Developing on a Home Assistant is so easy. Most people, even without programming experience, honestly can get started doing it. For something, I was about to say, as simple as adding a bank sensor, but, Anyway.
I know. You think of all the security protocols and all the extra stuff you'd have to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Surely a bank wouldn't be the easiest, but fair enough, Adam's done it. So
yeah,
awesome. Kudos to you, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's also a new Facebook group. So if you haven't checked that out yet, the link is in the show notes. It's facebook.com/group/home assistant. But if you don't want to type that out, check out the show notes and feel free to join. So that is similar to how Home Assistant has the community forums and such, and it's just another platform.
I helped put together the group a couple, I guess, months ago at this point, with Carlo Costanzo, who already had an existing group going with a couple of hundred people, and so we decided to kind of make it official, and so we attached it to the Home Assistant Facebook page, which I also help manage, and I'm really shocked at how well the group has been picked up. I think it kind of fills a gap between people using like Reddit or Twitter for those shorter questions, and users that actually understand where the community forums are and how to use them and things like that. So we're getting some really good discussions going on. I monitor it pretty closely, and so very happy. We're at just over 2,000 members already.
Wow.
So and the Facebook page itself, I think, has 6,000 or something. So we're already a third of the way there to the same number of likes. So
that's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
So we have Robbie and Stephen joining us today to talk about the new iOS app and the changes coming to the iOS app, I should say. So Robbie, can you sort of introduce yourself, and then Stephen, we'll get you to do the same, and just tell us how you came about to where you've been working and where you are today with working on Home Assistant.
Sure. So I live in Oakland, California. I have been involved in one way or another in Silicon Valley since about 2011. Worked a fair number of positions, everything from personal health to geospatial systems to communication systems for colleges. And now I am the CTO of a large media company that works with influencers on Facebook, as well as provides content to other media publishers like Condé Nast and Daily Dot. So I've been working with Home Assistant now for, I think, 4 years. Yeah, 4 years sounds about right, I think. Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I definitely was there around 0.21, I think. Yeah, I think that's actually when my first integration happened. I just got very tired of smart things, and just this wasn't directly why I created the iOS app, but smart things just at the time had such a bad app. It was slow, just rarely updated, and I think they had an outage one time, and I just said, this is enough, like, I'm done. and I somehow randomly found Home Assistant. I think it might have been through Hacker News, and I got it set up and immediately fell in love. I think within the first week or two, I wrote the Uber platform as a sensor.
Boo. Sorry, that'll become clearer later.
Yeah, that'll become clear.
Perfect. And Stephen, how about you?
Well, so that last boo doesn't become a weird thing. I now work at Lyft on the iOS app. So
there we go.
Yay, we have competitors.
Actually, small fact I forgot to mention, I did at one time work for Uber in their legal department. Funny enough.
Oh, wow.
An interesting career change.
Dude.
That must have been fun.
Oh, no, I was not a lawyer. I was I was writing software for their team.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, I did not go get my JD and then go to Uber for just a couple of months. Yeah.
This just proves that we can all come together.
Yeah, exactly.
Work together for good. Yes, all right. So yeah, I'm an iOS developer at Lyft right now. I've worked on a few other apps people might know about, like Google Photos, IMDb, and some others that you probably wouldn't, like the YouTube Creator Studio, which is an app for managing your YouTube channels, and a few more. I live up in Woodinville, Washington. I spent a little time in the Valley, but I don't know how anyone affords houses down there.
Poorly.
Yeah, apparently.
So I'm back up here, and I got into Home Assistant. I also started with Smart Things, and between internet issues and realizing Smart Things is completely useless when the internet goes, also having issues with the iOS app, I started drifting into Home Assistant and slowly migrating my stuff over there. And I just like the control that I have in Home Assistant land. And I was using the app for a while and just realized that I do this as a day job. I should probably start giving back to the community that I've gotten so much from, and started trying to find ways to help out with Robbie's work. And I've just been, going from there.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I guess I remember the iOS app coming out, and I thought, Robbie, was that you just said, that's it, today I'm going to make an iOS app and away I go? Or was there how did it become an official thing?
So I had been wanting to write iOS apps, not just for Home Assistant, but a number of things for a long time. I had a roommate for a very long time who became a very good iOS developer, and I was always kind of jealous. So I finally buckled down and did it one day, and I started with an app that allowed you to easily export your health kit data via webhooks. So that never saw the light of day. But I said, I built an app that I totally haven't released and nobody has ever seen. I can absolutely build a Home Assistant for iOS app. So basically, I threw together a quick demo for Paulus, who was kind of surprised at how fast it came together. The initial version had a fully native UI, so it didn't have the front end like it does now, and it had support for all of the basic things: lock, switch, sensor, binary sensor, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that was probably I just did the math last week when I put out some announcements about it. That was about 2.5 years ago now. And we had a native UI for the first couple of beta versions. I think we did about 60 beta versions before it actually went to the store.
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear though, a beta version is not like a Home Assistant version. There were a lot of the time it was just a couple of minor changes.
Right.
Yeah. It's easier to do betas on iOS apps than it is Home Assistant betas, because Apple with TestFlight allows users to quickly get notified and install the beta, and if it doesn't work, immediately go back to the previous one. So I felt a lot more comfortable about pushing out versions much more frequently. Anyway, so as to its officialness, I guess there had to have been some point at which Paulus said, yes, you can call this official. But I also am not sure that that's the case. So anyway, it is official now, one way or another. It's still published under my name because Apple doesn't allow you to just put any name in. It has to be a legal name, and Home Assistant at the time didn't have a company set up. So eventually we'll get it moved over so it doesn't say Home Assistant by Robert Trencheny. But yeah, it is now the one and only official mobile app for Home Assistant.
Very
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah. So how did you guys kind of get here to where we are today? So like what did that journey look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've done maybe 10 releases total since it went to the App Store. I was actually looking right now. No, we've got 7 releases over about 2 years.
Right.
So we've done a number of things. We eventually ended up removing the native UI.
I think I saw on Reddit, maybe it was Reddit, maybe you tweeted a couple of days ago that you're excited for people to create an Android app, but it's not as easy because there's no point in having an Android app. One, you can have a WebKit-based thing on Android anyway, and all the notification platforms are on Android anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the difference in the iOS world is iOS is so restricted that you can't do a lot of, the HTML5 push notifications and all that in iOS.
Yeah, I made that comment on Reddit on a pretty popular home automation thread. So just talking generally about the UI to start, the first issue is that yes, iOS is more restrictive. You can't do progressive web apps, which is what the front end is.
Right.
And so progressive web app is on Android, you can add it to your home screen and it will actually appear as a truly native app. So it will have, there's no way for you to tell basically that it's a HTML app, but there's still limits on it. For example, the push notifications do work, but I believe actions don't work, or you can't always get them unless the app is running or something. Right. Location just doesn't exist because HTML5 geolocation isn't built for what we need. And so, people would have to use a third-party app. Our recommendation is usually own tracks. The native UI, both in the iOS app and Android, it's a great idea. A lot of people on the Android side have tried to implement it. Most of those apps that did implement it are now dead. I don't say that to try to get people who are working on apps now to stop working on them. It's just that I think that people realize pretty quick once they get into a native UI and a couple of releases that Home Assistant just moves so fast. Mm-hmm. There's no way to keep up. Especially in a mobile app where, at least on the Apple side, and even somewhat true on the Google side, you have to go through reviews. So it's not like you can push out, a version every 2 weeks on the dot. And so, the time between the Home Assistant beta coming out, or the Home Assistant release coming out, I should say, and like the time it takes you to update for whatever changes in all the components that you support, and then test it, and then release it.
And then add the new components that were just added in.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the other thing too, is it's like, what components do you support? I mean, am I really going to add vacuum support to the iOS app? I mean, there was a pull request, not a pull request. There was an architecture issue opened last week, I think, where somebody wanted to add their shower as a component. There's a new model shower coming out from Cohen, I think, and it's fully connected, got an app, got an API, everything.
No.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
I want that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, am I really going to add support for that? Even though just maintaining like the I guess I would call them first party components, switch, lock, binary sensor, that kind of stuff. Those also change so frequently. And the other thing too is that there's a lot of platforms that people are using that have specific attributes that we would want to have exposed in the native UI. But I mean, the logic for every binary sensor, every switch that had properties that we wanted to specifically expose would be thousands of lines.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. That's how you get an app that's super bloated too, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that is one very good way to get that. Yeah. I feel like I'm rambling about the native UI, so feel free to drag me back into the center if you think I am.
No, not at all. I'm 100% behind you.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I thought about it. I was like, oh, I'm going to totally join this team and make some cool native UI because that's kind of what I do. And then I looked at the breadth of what it was, and I just like, nope, run away.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people come to me, a lot of other iOS developers come to me and be like, yeah, this can't be hard. Like, let's do it. It's going to take 2 days. And I'm like, there's no possible way that even if it did take 2 days, like, who's going to commit to updating it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would spend probably the total time for some of these larger releases would probably take you 2 to 4 weeks just to implement and accurately test across the board with real beta users before you could get a release out to the stores. And then talking more specifically about the Android app, a lot of people have said, why doesn't Home Assistant have an official Android app? My feeling, and my speaking as a, I guess, head of mobile at Home Assistant, let's say, my feeling and Paulus's feeling is that right now there isn't a big reason to create an Android app in an official capacity because we just don't have the resources to devote to it. I don't use Android. I have in the past, but it's not my choice anymore. Paulus does, but as some of you might know, Paulus has been a little busy recently with literally everything, so he doesn't really have time. And people in the community have stepped up, but I don't think that we have seen any kind of front runner come out from I think we're at like 5 or 6 Android apps now, and again, it's a lot of work. I only do a release for the iOS app maybe twice a year.
Right.
So, and that's really just because, one, there's usually a bug fix or two that has to go out. And two, I always try to integrate with whatever the latest iOS features are that come out. So I did a big release for iOS 10, 11, and now 12. And that kind of, we've got a 4.8 out of 5 stars on the App Store. We have over 100,000 downloads in the last 18 months. People obviously are loving it, and I don't get constantly harassed about bugs. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is that just having the front end with these very tightly integrated native features, location, and notifications is enough for people right now. Especially on iOS with things like HomeKit, which has such a deep integration with the OS.
Yeah.
And obviously we have a amazing HomeKit integration in Home Assistant now. And I can say that because I was the co-author with John Maddox of Homebridge Home Assistant for a long time until we shut that down a couple of weeks ago because the HomeKit integration has gotten so good.
Fair enough, yeah. So let's talk about kind of the releases that are coming up. So you mentioned, for example, you guys are doing some stuff with newer platforms and such. So I guess you guys are calling it like 1.5, right? Or Stephen, that's really, I guess you're driving that release.
Yeah, this is the one I've been digging the most into. This is the bit where the new hotness that everyone's been talking about recently is the new authentication system.
Yeah, and
it is really cool. But it gets very annoying if you've enabled support for it and your iPhone app can't do it. So I've been reworking a lot of the code to make it possible to add support for this system. And it's been a fairly deep dive, but we're starting to get to the other side of it. And I'm excited to let other people, play with this finally.
That's great.
I think you've been working on it since like June, right?
Oh my gosh, I know. And I thought this would be like, yeah, I'll finish this in like...
Oh, no.
Yeah, and let's be clear, nobody here is working around the clock.
Yeah.
I mean, both of us have, I have a job that takes probably 8 hours a day of work, and Stephen has a job probably takes a little less than 8, but he also has 2 kids. So, we all got stuff going on.
It takes less than 8.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had dueling deadlines, and now I've got... I took this on at the same time because I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it needed to get done. Yeah. And it's been an experience. But people seem really receptive. The people are really nice in when they, point out things that I could have done better. And they're very cool about it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yes.
And, I'm also getting to do stuff that will benefit that I wanted as well. Like event logging is another thing that I think probably the first thing I did, which is just putting a place where you can kind of see what the app is doing instead of kind of guessing about it.
Yeah.
And it's not quite where I imagined it yet. I want it to be a little bit cleaner, but it's already proved its usefulness in getting to the bottom of things during this beta period.
So when you say event logging, you're talking about like the iOS app having its own like debug log somewhere?
Yeah. This is its own like, app noticed it left a region, app sent a network request and it failed. Okay. Like these aren't Home Assistant things, but there's a lot of prior to that, there was a lot of like speculation as to why the app may or may not have done a thing. And now it's easier to kind of know the sequence that led to whatever issue you're having.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you're somebody like me trying to troubleshoot something, right? And saying, hey, you know what? Like exactly, why did this trigger go off or something like that because of my app?
Yep.
It's more detailed to look at. That's awesome.
Yeah. So a large chunk of this work has been just refactoring, kind of centralizing a lot of like the networking logic, reducing repeated code so that, one central call site can now know everything it needs to know about authenticating with the new system. And that's going to help us, move quickly, move faster in the future as we, add more support
of course.
To things.
Yeah.
We've also kind of modularized things so we can now use the new auth and in like the notification framework so that we can properly access your, resources from the server when you send a rich notification and it's, behind the new auth, we're now able to, the code is now shaped to make that possible where it wasn't before. That's going to come in really handy as well.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. And have you based it similar to the way you've done the front end so that if a new authentication platform comes out in 2 releases time, you don't have to push an iOS update out to support that?
Correct. The way Paulus and crew have done this auth system, the client can be really generic. They've done a really good job about that. And all we had to do was deal with the underlying kind of architecture of the auth system and give a few hooks into the app so that, what happens now instead of there being a web app that you have to sign into the web app and then the app that was talking to the server for notifications and location separately, instead of them both managing their separate authentication systems, the app manages it and then the web app loads and just asks the app, hey, give me my authentication information, and we hand it over. And then it'll say later, if you click the sign in button, hey, the user wants to sign out, and then it tells the app to do that for it. And it's kind of at this high level so that whatever changes happen later, we're already integrated.
That's cool.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I hope that statement doesn't bite me in the butt later, but I think we're good.
Famous last words.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch on that for a moment of Paulus and I recently have been talking more and more about the iOS app and the front end. And I think that this kind of shows, the authentication API shows how we can very, very tightly integrate the iOS app with the front end, to the point where we were discussing the possibility of having the iOS app settings entirely in the front end. And then the front end would communicate back to the iOS app. So, I think going back to an even earlier topic, I think for the long term, we're locked in on the front end, on using the front end versus a native API or native UI. Sorry. And so now we're kind of at the point where we just want to tightly integrate as much as possible so that, sign on, sign off, settings, all of that integration is as tight as possible and seamless for the user.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah. It's at the end of the day, like you said, it makes life easier for you guys as well, right? As developers or anybody else helping out on the project too, as developers, it's, you work with the underlying piece that Home Assistant Core takes care of. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it lets us spend time focusing on like the things people actually want to use the iOS app for, such as notifications. I personally think that we have probably one of the most, if not the most powerful notification systems of literally any app in the iOS store. I don't think any other app allows you to customize and build your own rich iOS notifications like we do. I would say the same with location. We have a very advanced location system which supports any number of features that most apps don't even think about. So, I mean, I think we're very close to the point of even surpassing own tracks, which I kind of hold as the gold standard for location updating on mobile.
Very cool.
So,
because 1.5 has a whole bunch of location improvements, doesn't it?
Yeah. So a bunch of interesting things there. The first big thing, and this is one of the few things that I added to this release that Stephen didn't work on, is we've added core motion support. So core motion is a framework in iOS that allows for detection of how you are moving at the moment that we go to update your location. So now in Home Assistant for iOS 1.5, whenever your location does update, you'll see a new property being sent to Home Assistant, which will allow you to build automations based on how you are moving. So iOS can natively detect if you're stationary, walking, running, in a car, or if you're on a bicycle. So, you could start building automations around, hey, if I'm out for a run right now, do this thing.
That's awesome.
Or if I'm in the car, do this. Yeah.
That is very, very cool. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't have concrete use cases for that, but it was so simple to add that it was like, why not?
Oh, there will be someone with use cases for sure.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I bet. Well, and I mean, I can think of one or two right now, right? It's like if I'm, for example, like I don't know how direction plays into this, but if if it sees I'm in a car and I'm at my office in downtown Toronto and I'm coming eastbound, it's, hey, am I going home? Right? And then you can have some kind of a trigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, the app does already have directional support. I don't think a lot of people realize how much data we do send as part of the location updates. But I mean, just looking at it right now, obviously we've got your latitude and longitude, but we've also got like what caused this update. Was it a background fetch? Was it a manual update? Was it requested via push notification? The timestamp, your speed, your course, the accuracy level, your altitude, and now your motion.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
So yeah, I mean, so that's already possible today.
Phil and I did an episode around just saying, hey, how do we do location tracking and how do you do all of that? So this might actually make me switch. I think I'm going to be using this natively because that's just super cool.
Wait, what are you using right now?
So right now I'm actually using the SmartThings app, believe it or not, and then I'm pushing that through MQTT. So
yeah, okay, all right, yeah, you should switch. I mean, again, not just for location, but notifications. Like I said, it's just second to none.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I used the Home Assistant app just for. I use it at home, but I still use that one for location. So get rid of an app now.
Okay. Other location improvements, we now are supporting what Apple calls visit updates. People ask me somewhat often, why can't we just have location updating every 10 minutes or something? Apple doesn't allow that. You can't run a background process 24/7 with a timer like that. So we have to use all of these different inputs that allow us to trigger an update. So things like background fetch, which is when Apple will actually wake up the app every couple of minutes and let us do some work for a couple of seconds, or push notifications, or significant location changes. This new one, Visit, is a little interesting. So iOS, for the last couple of versions now, has been able to natively detect where you go frequently, and when you enter or leave that place, alert us that you have entered or left it. We don't know the address or anything like that, but we do have the latitude and longitude. So effectively, you could eventually build a new map that would allow you to see your most frequently visited places, and iOS actually will tell us the exact moment that you entered the place and left the place, and we pass that data through as well. Again, I don't see a real use case for it immediately, but I'm sure somebody will come up with one.
Yeah, I'm guessing it will be similar to the zones feature in Home Assistant, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's actually a better way to explain it, is think of it as zones, but instead of having to make a zone for your local Starbucks that you go to every day, the system just automatically detects it and will submit location updates for it.
Cool. Okay.
Hopefully this is giving some people some ideas.
Yeah.
Well, it's giving me some ideas, so already worth it for me.
Well, here you go. When I enter the Starbucks zone, find out from my bank what my bank balance is, and then remind me not to buy a coffee. Yeah.
Tell me if I need to turn around or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man.
Exactly. So today, let me ask you guys this then. So today, if I'm on the beta, so I have test flight. So is this what I'm downloading? If I
yes.
Okay. That's very cool.
Modulo a few bugs that we're still working out, but yes.
Yeah. No, of course.
So we have added some advanced server options, as I call them. I got to come up with a better name. For a long time, we've had requests from people to support HTTP basic authentication. We've added that. That was a simple thing. The other interesting one that we've added now is internal and external URLs. There are some people that don't have DNS servers running locally or haven't been able to configure DNS properly so that they are connecting to the right place, depending on if they're at home or not. And so now in 1.5, we actually will be able to detect the name of the wireless network that you're on, and you are able to set an internal and external URL. So when we attempt to connect to Home Assistant, if we see that you're on your Wi-Fi network, we can use one URL, and if you aren't on your Wi-Fi network or if you're on cellular, we'll use a separate URL. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I use this personally. Like this is something I have because I've set up an HTTPS Nginx proxy for accessing my setup from outside the home, and my router didn't support. I think it's called hairpin DNS. Basically, being able to check an internal source for what IP you should return for a given host name, so you can have a separate IP if you're inside than if you ask for the same URL outside. So I need to have two separate URLs so that the app can continue to talk to the server as I move in and out. And this comes in really handy.
Yeah. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on is, so yes, the new Auth API is here. We're very happy about it. We do apologize that it was a bit delayed, but obviously we've had other stuff going on. I do want to specifically call out that we are still supporting what we call legacy authentication, meaning the API password. Right. And we took that decision because made that decision, I should say, because this is the last iOS 9 release. I can't remember if we already brought that up, but that would be another big warning sign to put out, is that this is the last iOS 9 release of the Home Assistant for iOS app. There's a very small group of users, it's less than 300 last I checked, using iOS 9, but we needed to make sure that, if they are stuck in the Stone Ages intentionally on, Home Assistant 0.5 or something, that they are still able to use the app. So we haven't removed anything, just enhanced it.
Right. So I'm guessing, that means like the iOS version 1.5 will be the last version that will work on iOS version 9.
Correct. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. So we made it a very good one for you. The compatibility promise that I have personally had, and most apps on the App Store have, is supporting the last two iOS versions. So now that iOS 12 has come out, we are dropping support for iOS 9. We will support iOS 10 until iOS 13 comes out, and so on.
So what's coming out? What's the roadmap?
Yeah, so we've been working on all of this, and we've also had time for a lot of other fun stuff. So shortly after the 1.5 release, probably within 2 weeks or so of the 1.5 release, will be my release, which is 2.0. Now, for those of you that are saying that I was being unfair, I did give Stephen the option of calling his 2.0 because I think that it is that big of an update that it's worthy of it. But he was the gentleman and he took 1.5, so I will be 2. I'm very happy. 2.0 is the iOS 12 release. So it's building on the foundational improvements that Stephen has brought us with 1.5 and really just kind of tightening everything up as well as adding support for iOS 12. So iOS 12, really not a big release compared to what previous iOS versions have done from Apple, but still some pretty good stuff we can take advantage of. The first area I'd like to highlight is notification improvements. So Apple has finally given us what they call critical alerts. So critical alerts are a special type of push notification that will totally bypass any do not disturb or silent ringer,
nice.
anything like that, no matter what. Yeah. So in fact, I think even if you have headphones plugged in, it will still output to the speaker as well as the headphones. So basically, you're not going to miss it no matter what. It's a pretty simple thing to add to your existing automations or your existing notification payloads. It's just a single key that you add. And then Apple has actually gone a step further and allows you to define what specific sound to play for the critical alert as well as what volume to play it at. So you can kind of use that volume. I mean, the thing that I think of critical alerts as being perfect for is if you're asleep and a motion sensor goes off like you aren't expecting it to, or a door opens. You might want to have a motion sensor critical alert, but only at 50% volume because you have a cat walking around and sometimes it trips the sensor. But if a door opens, you want that at 100% volume. I'm very excited for that personally. Now, I do have to say that Apple kind of hasn't gotten their act together a little bit. We have to request special permission from Apple to allow our app to use this functionality. I submitted that request back in June, just one day after they announced it at WWDC this year. I still haven't heard back, and it sounds like what actually happened is that they lost all of the submissions. So, yeah, they posted a notice about that last week, and I resubmitted again. Or sorry, 3 weeks ago they posted that. I submitted it again. I still haven't heard back. So I've been in touch with developer support and they've escalated it. But fun fact about how Apple handles developers and apps is all of the policy teams, all of the review teams are totally firewalled off from the rest of the organization. Right. There's no possible way for developer support to talk to the team that needs to handle this entitlement. So my understanding is they are having to escalate it basically up through the VP level to be able to get that message across. So anyway, so I will warn people, critical alerts is a big enough thing that I am going to delay release of 2.0 until we have that entitlement. So the entitlement is the permission. So that might add a week or two. I'm very on top of Apple now. I'm hoping that they're not going to take longer than that, but we'll see.
So do you have the ability to specify in Home Assistant with your automations when a critical alert is sent, or is it all done on the app side?
No, yeah, it's in on the Home Assistant side.
Okay.
So much like right now, if you look at some of the more advanced notification options that we have, so things like sending a map or sending the live camera view or actions, you can define all of that in the payload at the time that you are sending the notification. You do not have to pre-configure anything.
Okay.
So you do have to accept the permission on your device just one time, but after that, nothing else.
So to me, this is similar to how in BlackBerry they used to be able to send what is it called? I think it was called like P1 alert or something like that.
And yes, yeah, the high priority.
Yeah, exactly, right. So regardless, if something's happening, it can wake you up regardless of if your phone is on silent or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah. So critical alerts, it'll be interesting to see what people use. It'll be interesting to see what people do. I'll just leave it at that.
Have Apple said anything about the type of apps that they'll be opening this entitlement skill up to? Like, surely this would seem more like a government-only sort of apps only, not every single app in the App Store having the ability to apply for
thankfully, they aren't that restrictive. I mean, they're restrictive, but not that restrictive on it. So we do fall into one of the categories that they allow. Looking at it, they are allowing healthcare, public safety, personal safety and security, enterprise in-house, and other apps.
Okay, great.
So yeah, we definitely fall into one of the categories. I'm not worried about it. And developer support did say that they've gotten a couple of requests like mine of why haven't I heard anything back? So it's not like they're just ignoring me or anything like that. Yeah. So moving on, again, a minor thing, but still useful quality of life improvement. So iOS 12 added support for notification groups. So instead of just having a big stream of notifications for the one app, you can actually group them by a custom property that you can set, again, when you're sending the notification from Home Assistant. So the best use case here would be, you can send the entity ID or some other unique string every time that you send a notification. And so anytime you send another notification in the future, the future notifications will be grouped with the existing ones. So you can have like 5 or 6 different groups going in of notifications, and they stick together.
So this might be good for people with plant sensors, have a group. Okay, your plant is low on moisture and, the soil isn't good, and group them together.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So so that you can just get one concise update, more or less, of here's the 5 notifications that came in overnight relating to your plant, and you can just see the whole status right there in your Today view. Yeah, and the app does automatically group its notifications as well. So we will group zone notifications automatically as well as location notifications. And so you can easily delete that single group from your notifications if you want, if you don't care about those notifications.
That's nice. Yeah, it makes managing them so much easier then.
Yeah. Exactly. The last thing in notifications is something that I put together like in 4 hours last night, just because once I thought about it, I realized that we should just do it and get it over with. Previously, we have supported custom actions in notifications. So custom actions allow you to set up buttons that will display under the notification when it comes in and you expand it. And those buttons actually will when you click them, they will send a notification back to Home Assistant that you can use for automations. And so, examples of that are, if you have a notification sent whenever motion is detected in your home while you're away or asleep, you can add an action to that notification. And then when you tap it, let's say the button is sound alarm. When you tap it, Home Assistant will see an event come in that has sound alarm in it, and you can automatically trigger the alarm, all without opening an app or the front end or anything. So we've already had support for that, but it's been very hard to configure because a combination of YAML as well as just how rich of a syntax Apple has and how many different things can get changed. So we've deprecated all of that, and now you can configure all of the actions in the app, which also allows you to preview as you're working on it. So previously you would have to configure it in YAML, and then you would have to go to the iOS app and hit update from Home Assistant, and then have to send a notification to test it. Now you just configure it all in the app, you manage it in the app, and you can hit preview in the app to see what those actions look like. So yeah, that should be useful as well, kind of pulling away more from the configuration that we've previously done on the Home Assistant configuration side. So that will also be good.
That's amazing. You did that already?
Yes. Yeah, it's done. It's in the branch. It's tested. Yeah. It's in the database and everything. Yeah. I mean, it was really pretty straightforward. I mean, I had written the code once already for supporting the Home Assistant configuration side, so it wasn't that hard to rewrite it. I got a lot of time on my hands, Stephen. Sorry.
Dude, that's amazing. I'm excited for that.
That is very cool.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, yeah. So I think that's it for notifications.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot since because the new iPhones just came out, obviously, and obviously the new iOS 12's come out. Everyone is talking about Siri Shortcuts, and I have no idea what that means because I'm an Android user. So can you explain what Siri Shortcuts are?
Siri Shortcuts are like Tasker for Android, but on iOS.
Okay.
So you can set up very complex actions, which you can trigger via Siri, you can trigger via your Apple Watch, or you can trigger manually in the Shortcuts app. So Siri Shortcuts, the Siri part of that, is a little bit of a misnomer because it's actually integrated like throughout the system in many different ways. But that's what Apple's calling it. So now, in the 2.0 version of Home Assistant, we have support for Siri Shortcuts. So what that means is that you can make complex workflows that interact with Home Assistant. So, for example, you could set up a shortcut that you trigger whenever you leave your office and you're on the way home, and it could do a number of things like it can send an SMS automatically without confirmation to your wife or partner, and then it can tell Home Assistant to prepare the home environment for your arrival by calling a service or firing an event via a Siri shortcut. So they're a bit limited right now in that Apple doesn't allow for parameters to be passed in and out as part of one of these workflows. But the trick that the iOS developer community has come up with is using the pasteboard or the clipboard. And so all of these shortcuts, and I'll get into them in a moment, all of them will interact with the clipboard to allow you to get data into and out of Home Assistant. Just to go over the shortcuts quickly. So send location, call service, fire event, get entity state, set entity state, and then get image from camera. So using call service as an example with that clipboard. So you can just add a generic call service into your workflow as a shortcut, into your workflow. and it will automatically see what's on your pasteboard. And if you have JSON formatted the right way on your pasteboard, it will use that to call the service and send the data to Home Assistant. And Siri Shortcuts allows you to set what's on the pasteboard. So you can use all kinds of variables and all these different functionalities that have been unlocked with Shortcuts with Home Assistant now, just through your pasteboard.
That's awesome.
That is neat.
Yeah, kind of a little hard to explain in audio, but I think once you understand how shortcuts work and you see it in action, people will understand the power of this. They're very, very generic, meaning that you can put any kind of data in on the pasteboard that you want, but there's also a way that you are able to totally set up a shortcut and add it to the system so that you can just say, like, let's say that you don't have HomeKit or Amazon Echo set up. You can say, turn on my lights, and it will automatically call the right service with the right entity ID. So you can set that all up in the UI, or you can just use the generic actions that will just take whatever on your pasteboard. So yeah, again, kind of complex to explain, but I think anybody that understands the power of Siri Shortcuts with other apps will immediately understand how cool this will be. And eventually, speaking quickly about Siri, I want to get to a point probably in the next couple of months where we do have a tighter integration with Siri specifically for the Siri watch face on the Apple Watch. So that would allow the app to determine when you are doing certain actions and automatically resuggest them on the watch so that you can just kind of one tap and like call a service or fire an event or something like that.
So you could maybe have like a list of favorites on your watch, if you're with...
Yes.
And then just have it easily like a light that's on your watch that you can turn off and on quickly and easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Stephen, you might be able to add some color because I feel like I didn't explain that super well, but it's very hard to explain.
I think you got to the meat of it. It's a layer that lets you automate things with your phone, Home Assistant, and other apps, combining them together. There actually might be more potential for productive mayhem because they actually let you run like random JavaScript in Safari and output results of that into other things.
Ooh,
and
that sounds like it could be a security issue, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. This is
Apple.
It's
Apple, so they're pretty careful.
Yeah.
They warn you when you're doing stuff like that. Anytime that you want to run that JavaScript, they do pop a warning saying like,
"Oh, okay, that's less fun."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can override it, but yeah, there's lots of things you can do.
I mean, this is one of the things I was excited about in iOS 12 for the day when I have free time to experiment with things. I think Google has gone the route of trying to understand the world. So you can just say, turn on the lights, and it understands you're in this room. So turning on the lights means turn on this light, which is cool, but it's limited in how much Google can make naturally understandable. Apple went the other way and basically allowed every app to just expose things, whatever they do to the system, and then the user can cobble together their own custom powerful script. It's less flexible, but it will have a broader reach than Google has, and I'm really curious to see which system wins out. But I think there's a lot of potential in these Siri shortcuts.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, moving on. So I do have some surprise announcements that I saved specifically for you for this podcast. So I'm very happy to announce that it has been somewhat requested over the years, not as much as other things that we'll get to, but we are adding Apple Watch support in the 2.0 release.
That's cool.
So the watch is only going to support what Apple calls complications. So complications are the little dials and numbers that you see on the Apple Watch face. So it's pretty, again, generic, and it allows you to do any number of crazy things with it. Specifically, we've added template support. So anytime that your Apple Watch goes to update the complication data, we can actually trigger or we can render a template with whatever data you want, and then show that in the complication. So obviously it's pretty small screen space, so you would probably just want to do like a number or, a character or two, depends on what watch face you're using.
So I'm guessing someone could use this to run a template to like extract the temperature inside from like a Nest or one of their little temperature sensors that they've got already in Home Assistant.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, and this, kind of the other hack that this allows is any data that you can get into Home Assistant, you can now get onto your Apple Watch. So that's also kind of interesting because you could put, I've thought for a long time about using Home Assistant just as a generic, like put any kind of data or service into. For example, I live in an apartment building that has security downstairs and they take care of my packages and deliveries and things like that. And so I already have scripts set up. The security service calls me whenever there's a person to see me or a delivery or a package to be picked up. And I actually have counters in Home Assistant to say, you have 3 packages that need to be picked up. And so I've put that onto a complication so that when I'm walking in the door, I can see if I have any packages that need to be picked up or not.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's just an example of what's possible with the watch. There's no app integration, meaning that if you tap a complication, it doesn't, it doesn't pop up the entire front end on your Apple Watch or anything like that. But I think at least complications are a good first step in exploring the watch.
Yeah, definitely.
It also it looks really cool. So yeah,
that's cool.
That's actually going to be there's going to be a few use cases, and it sounds like you doing the template way. You've just allowed people to do whatever data they want can be now put on there, as long as it fits on the screen, of course. But yeah, that's going to be really cool. I'm going to be excited to see what comes out of that.
Sounds like I need to buy a new Apple Watch for research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, research.
Phil, it also sounds like you might be switching to iOS here soon.
Also sounds like hell might freeze over.
Join us.
And then the last thing is we are bringing support for Today widget. So the Today view for you users of iOS is when you pull down from the top and you get the notification sheet, and then you switch to the left, or swipe to the left, sorry. You have all of those beautiful widgets, like I've got battery and calendar, carrot, weather, news. So Home Assistant is going to be a widget there as well. So you'll be able to add it, and you'll be able to customize what functionalities are in there. It's just going to be buttons to start. There's not going to be any text labels or anything like that with templates. But you'll be able to specify in a similar system to how we are setting up Siri shortcuts. If you press this button, call this service, fire this event, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people have been asking for that for a long time. So happy to bring that to them.
The Today area is such a good little side area in the iOS that you can just see, a list of summary things. Maybe you could put in all the temperatures in every room as part of that widget or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
Home Assistant available on every surface possible.
There you go.
That was kind of my goal with 2.0, and honestly the goal now that I feel that the notification and location system have kind of been built to their max. There's really not much more work to do. I think now, like, the next generation, the next phase of things to work on in the iOS app is integration with the system as deeply as possible. So you see that in things like Siri shortcuts and the watch complications and the Today widget. There's lots of other ways that we can go. We can eventually add an action button, again, to allow you to call services or fire events. There's many, many ways to go in terms of integrating with iOS. It really just comes down to whatever is going to eventually win me an Apple Developer Award at WWDC one of these years.
So as the app, can you access details of the device? I know you can get the location, but could you pass through the battery level of the phone to Home Assistant? so people could get
You really
alerts.
got to switch to iOS. We've had that since day one.
Well, there you go.
we already passed through the battery status.
Yep.
So if it's charging, if it's draining, if it's I think it's just those two states actually, and then the percentage battery as well. So and actually that brings up another topic that I thought of very quickly. So adding support for more sensors that we are sending to Home Assistant is also going to be one of my goals for the future. So we've had requests over the years, for example, to add health kit support. So let's say you want to get your steps from your phone onto Home Assistant, or you want to get your heart rate or something. So adding support for that would be very cool.
Yeah.
Being able to, if you think about it, there's so many things that we could expose to Home Assistant. HealthKit alone, I think, has almost 300 data points, or categories of data that you can get, everything from heart rate to how much water you've had to drink today. But there's also things like, how many photos have you recently taken? How many, what your current connection type is, whether it's cellular or LTE or 3G or Wi-Fi. And, yeah, there's all kinds of crazy things that we will be able to add now that, again, we have this amazing foundational improvement that Stephen has given us. So yeah, it's all new features from here on out is basically what I'm trying to say, I guess.
What about iPad
That is
support?
very cool.
Have you got support for the iPad?
Already supported the iPad since day one.
So there you go, another day one feature. So people could potentially be running Home Assistant as on their kitchen wall with an iPad.
Yeah, I have seen some people doing it already, so it is possible. And, if you want to talk about other platforms, eventually adding macOS support, tvOS support, those could also be interesting as well.
Yeah.
tvOS would only be for notifications. Obviously, you don't want to be updating the location of your Apple TV, which is plugged into your TV at home constantly. And then macOS, I think it's been pretty well known. Apple hasn't shown it as much love as iOS in the last couple of years. So, we could do location, but notifications are more limited there, but still doable. So, yeah. And again, talking about how all the amazing work Stephen's done, he has really separated out the logic of the API and the internal mechanisms that are core to any integration or any platform that we come to. So, it's really pretty easy now to kind of take that framework that he has built and drop it into a totally new app and adapt it to a platform. So,
yeah, that's great. You guys have done just kicking goals over here. You've got two releases. So you've got version 1.5 and version 2.0 coming out. Are they both available for beta right now?
Yep. So right now, 1.5 is just in beta. 2.0, we are holding on releasing to beta until we are confident in 1.5 and we get it out the door, because the worry is that if we just put 2.0 out right now for beta tests, that people are going to immediately start using it and they're not going to catch bugs that were actually introduced in 1.5 versus 2.0.
Right.
Yeah. So Stephen is currently targeting 1.5 to be released to Apple for review within about 2 weeks of this coming Monday. So October 1st.
Where does it go?
So 2 weeks from October 1st at I hesitate to say at worst, knock on wood, but
man, don't do that to me.
But yeah, and then the 2.0 release, the timing is questionable just because we are ready to put it out for beta as soon as we feel comfortable in the 1.5 beta process. So meaning that if we are confident in 1.5 and it's going to take a couple more days for Apple to review it, or we've just got to do some minor touch-ups, we would release 2.0 to beta then. But anyway, assume that 2.0 will come out within 2 weeks of the 1.5 version being released to the store. So no later than November 1st is when you would see all of this goodness coming to you.
So 2.0 as an official release, not a beta release.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
As soon as 1.5 is on the store, it's 2.0 will go to beta.
I swear I'm gonna get there.
Yeah.
Pressure's on.
No pressure.
No, I want it out there as badly as everyone else does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We all do. So, and actually, I should also add too, as we're kind of wrapping up, that I opened up public beta signups this week. So for a long time, Apple would only allow you to add beta testers by getting their email, their first name, and their last name. They finally, as of this week, have allowed for a link to be generated, which any number of users can sign up with. We're at over 700 users as of this morning, just in the last 72 hours that have signed up. So thank you to everybody who's beta testing. Please keep giving us that feedback because it is, super, super required for us to get both these releases out the door. So I'm hoping we crack 1,000 people in the next week, which would be amazing. I mean, Stephen and I were talking last night about how much more confident we're both feeling, knowing that instead of the 30 users that we had beta testing, now we have, almost 1,000.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to give you a lot more confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking to sign up, we'll put a link in the show notes, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
There's always the iOS section of the forums, which has the beta testing link pinned to the top.
I think I also saw it in the Facebook group as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. I try to, whenever we make a announcement on the Facebook page, that I also publish it into the group. So just because we want to reach everybody. All right, so I have one last topic, which is going to be very short. Think of this as the one more thing of this podcast.
Oh boy!
So,
drum roll.
Obviously, Paulus was on last week's episode. I think
he was
talking about Nabu Casa. So, in discussion with him, our plan in the next while, I'm not going to assign specific dates to it, is to add Home Assistant Cloud support to the iOS app. That means that you will no longer have to have a port open on your router. You will no longer have to deal with DNS. You will just be able to sign in to the Home Assistant Cloud in the iOS app, and you're done. We do not have a timeline on this. It is not going to be a 1.5 or 2.0. There's not going to be a surprise. But down the road, that is going to be one of our future goals, is to integrate with Home Assistant Cloud directly. We would, of course, not be removing the existing connection method. So nobody's going to, have to make the terrible choice between subscribing to Cloud and setting up port forwarding and stuff.
This is going to be so much easier.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also equally good that you guys are supporting backwards compatibility for those that won't have Home Assistant Cloud as well. So yes, thank you for that. Yeah, people will appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, I do absolutely recommend, even if you don't use any of the features, even if you don't believe in giving your data to the Home Assistant Cloud, whatever, still subscribe. It supports the developers. It supports the forums. The forums are not cheap to run. I help maintain them. Please, just, it's $5 a month, and it goes to a good cause, I guess. So, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for coming on, and thank you for all your hard work, both Robbie and Stephen. You've done an outstanding job on the iOS app, and it's really cool to see all the future plans and future updates you're bringing out as well.
A pleasure.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
And we'll have to get you guys back on another episode and really break down how you guys are using Home Assistant, because I'm guessing you guys have got some really cool setups as well.
Happy to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much for the time, guys.
No, you're welcome.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.